Data log of Salian First Contact, 2667. War Chief Torlak. "What say the scanners?" demanded Torlak at a young bridge officer. "Nothing currently, War Chief. Just some background noise of the nearby gas giant," he said before continuing his work. He pondered the viewport from his raised seat and took in the hum of electronics present on the bridge, with the crew manipulating data on their respective screens. Before him, a series of celestial bodies were dotted on a holographic display in the center of the bridge. 6 planets were present with an asteroid that separated the 5th from the 6th body, which happened to be a large gas giant with several more moons orbiting it. Instead, he turned his attention toward the 4th and 5th planets, which orbited relatively close but barely outside each other's influence. He manipulated the display on the 2, and in full color showcased 2 planets vibrant with blue and green, indicating a possibility for life. "Creo, what can you tell me about these 2 worlds?" Torlak asked his chief star scientist. "They are Demira and Anmira, sister planets recently discovered just last year by a group of explorers commissioned by the Fathers to explore this region of space," he explained. "As long as it's away from Galactic Union space," Torlak said, garnering small snickers from the crew, "they're nothing but fanatical." His crew nodded in agreement before one of the crew members called his attention. "War Chief, I'm picking up a signal opposite the planet. It's small, but I think I can access it." Torlak pondered the notion before waving his hand with assent. What felt like days was only mere minutes before he exclaimed his findings. "Chief, I have it. Shall I bring it up on screen?" Torlak nodded. "Do it." Before he and the crew were a series of images and sounds that assaulted their ears before being isolated into individual entities. Torlak looks upon the cycling of images and video before him. Hairless bipeds with the only evidence of hair on their heads and face. Creo began cycling through his data pad on all the known races within the Galactic Union, but came up empty. "I thought this area of space was void of a colony," Torlak stated. "It should be," Creo responded. "The Home Council has yet to approve this system's colonization. It is still pending." So far, the images and video, while still jarring, were not as much of a concern as finding a new race of sapient beings. However, he held on to his reservations. "Cease all communications and ensure we haven't been detected," he ordered. His crew did as they were told and awaited his next series of instructions. After it was reported they were clear, the bridge returned to only the hum of electronics and ventilation before he answered. "Return home," he said promptly. "Leave a probe in the asteroid field and arrange a meeting with the War Council in interspace." They did as they were ordered and noticed a probe make its way into the asteroid field closest to Anmira, facing both planets. Their orbits were more or less in sync, and Torlak used that to keep an eye on both planets. The probe was the latest in stealth capability and is primarily used for military operations to keep their eyes on the edge of Union space. However, he had a feeling about these beings that didn't sit right with him, and instead chose to convene with the War Council on the matter. The chamber was in an uproar. "Are we sure they're not one with the Galactic Union?" one councilman asked. "Beyond our region of space? Are you absurd?" another rebuked. This continued with War Chief Torlak standing before them as they argued among one another before ultimately turning their attention toward the one in question. "What say you, War Chief?" The center-most council member beckoned. His demeanor was calm and his leathery-like skin was wrought with creases and scars from battles past. "I have provided what information we could gather," he said, projecting the information on a hologram projector in the center of the room. Many of the photos and videos showcased were innocent, showing parental figures and their offspring, much like how his people would memorialize their travels. However, we did come across what seems to be a news report within their people. "Phonetically, yes, our language is similar. Their script, however, is vastly different from ours. I had some of our technicians translate it." He turned on the audio log across the bottom. "TRSC, Troops Secure Refinery Depot in Alameda System." "Do they use Galactic Common, War Chief?" one council member asked. "Phonetically, yes, our language is similar. Their script, however, is vastly different from ours. I had some of our technicians translate it." He turned on the audio. Republic forces in proximity to Alameda system, led by Vice Admiral Wolf, retook control of the largest refinery in the system, and workers are rejoicing at their rescue. On the ground, leading the decisive assault was Lieutenant O'Brien, who... The feed was cut off and the council members groaned with dismay. "I am sorry, but that was all we could retrieve before we had to leave the system," Torlak responded to their groans. The council members looked at one another and began their debate. If this is truly an independent race, should we not induct them under He Union? One in green robes suggested but was rebuked by one dressed in red. "Are you crazy? Our relationship with the Union is too strained to bring them in. I'm surprised they haven't sent the Flag and Legion unions after us. As long as they hold up their end of the treaty, we should be fine. I think we should make diplomatic contact with them." Another in blue added to the conversation. This would continue back and forth, and Torlak could do nothing but wait. After several hours, it seemed they had finally come to a final decision. "It is the opinion of this council that this new race be promptly and swiftly eradicated." A member who donned purple spoke. "May I ask the reason? I find this decision most ill," Torlak responded. The one in purple rose. He had an arrogant face and his actions felt like they were wishing for a fight. "You know our history with the Galactic Union and our hard-fought war to gain our independence from them." Torlak nodded. "We simply cannot risk another species into the fold. They have shown that they still fight among their own and show no sense of unity. In any case, this might provide a needed advantage to gain favor with the Union." He said, his nose raised slightly to the air. "Do you accept this task?" "I do," Torlak said, kneeling. He was dismissed and he left for his ship. The decision weighed heavily on his mind. He would resolve himself and complete his task. He entered his ship and with his battle group set off to their first target. Torlak and his battle group drifted through space, scanning all parts of the sector. They entered from the outermost part of the system, with the planets Demira and Anmira. "Ensure all ships are at stealth output and jam any signals that enter our sphere," Torlak commanded. He peered out into the void and magnified images of the respective planets were in front of him. He noticed more buzz around the bodies, more than before, and issued a caution to the group. He once again thought to himself about the purpose of his mission. He understood that what he was about to commit goes against much of what he believed in, but found ways to rationalize it. Steeling himself, he spoke to the group. "Attention to all within the War Council's attack force. We are about to engage whose expansion is imperial and threatens our borders. Just like with the advances of the Galactic Union, we will not yield our home to invaders." Cheers rang out from the intercom of his ships and among his bridge. His speech renewed his resolve, and he gave the orders to advance. The speech he gave was the official declaration among his people, and they accepted it. If anything resembled the Union, they hated it and sought its destruction. A result of this is also the increase in recruitment into all branches. They needed more soldiers, and this was the perfect reason for them to join. Utilizing their medium-sized vessels, they started toward all communication relays, which only numbered 4. Their forces split and 2/3 headed for Demira, while the other third headed for Anmira. As soon as they left sublight travel, they destroyed the relays and bombarded stations that orbited the planets. The ships nearby were all cargo and no bigger than their small frigates. They were commercial, but that didn't stop Torlak and his group. They continued their sudden attack and chased any ships that tried to leave, jamming all signals as they did so. When their scans showed no movement, they turned their sights onto the planet and sent out raiding parties. During the start of the raid, he received a call from the leader of the ground forces. "Chief General Torlak," the individual called. "What do you want us to do with the non-combatants?" Torlak pondered. He knew he was cruel as a commander, but he wasn't a monster. "Kill the warriors and take the rest as slaves. Perhaps we can sell them to the Union." He paused. "But keep the young and healthy. Kill the rest." "Yes, Chief General," he said and cut his transmission. Several large cargo ships made their way to the surface and promptly loaded their newly acquired prizes. He hadn't planned for slaves, but felt that if they could take as much as they can, it could buy favor from the Union and improve their standing to not be their target. He knew it to be cruel, but pushed it to the back of his mind. Operations were smooth when the planet scarred. He and his group pressed on before receiving notice from one of his crewmen. Chief General, picking up a singular ship on the edge of the system. Do we have ships nearby to intercept? He nodded. We do, already on their way. Torlak nodded. The ship in question was a stubby ship with room for two, and the engines made up almost the entire ship. Nothing was outstanding of the ship to warrant suspicion. It just looked odd. As he was peering at the hollow projector, he was notified again by the same previous crewman. Sir, the ship is leaving the system toward an inter-system gate they had entered from. He raised his non-existent eyebrows, urging the crewman to continue. We got scans of the ship from the closest interceptor. He paused. Sir, it's a data runner. What? Torlak roared. After it, and destroy it. The three interceptors fired a volley of projectiles, largely missing their mark. The craft was accelerating faster than the interceptors before it opened a tear in space near an inter-system gate. Torlak was dumbfounded, along with the rest of the crew. Among the silence, he heard a mumble from one of the crewmen who manned the sensor arrays on the ship. They don't use a gate, he said in an audible whisper. But that's impossible. Creo, what's he talking about? Torlak ordered from his chief scientist. It appears that this race doesn't use the conventional inter-system gate that us in the Union use. He swallowed. Instead, they just tore through space and, well, vanished. He was at a loss. All ships, both Celian and Galactic Union, utilize two forms of travel. Sublight is used for travel between celestial bodies in a system, and the inter-system gate, a tunnel of space that connects one system to another. Previous eras utilized large gates that could open up an interspace gate, but now ships have that technology on board, and they can open it if they are close enough. So whatever this ship did was outside their realm of knowledge. Forcefully, he shoved those thoughts aside. All ships, advance to the nearest ice gate and await your orders. All slave ships, proceed home. I will send word of our cargo. Torlak cut his transmission and proceeded toward their designated spot. This is just the beginning, he said aloud. His crew nodded and he and the rest of his fleet readied before the inter-system gate. As he said, he relayed word to the War Council about their latest cargo and what was to be done. With that out of the way, he pressed on and waited until all available warships were present before entering the gate. Before advancing, he addressed all ships present. Now is the moment of truth. We are embarking on a journey foreign to us. Much like the Union, this republic has encroached on our territory without so much a warning. We will not yield to invaders. Press on. A large circular gate opened that separated tunnel space from real space. The tunnel swirled in green and white with jagged sparks of plasma intermittently dancing from the tear in real space. One by one, Celian ships entered the gate, and as the last entered, space was returned to its silent void. Data log of Celian First Contact, 2667. Chief Counsel Callum. Callum exhaled an audible sigh once Torlak left. Other members of the council began discussing among themselves once again the matter at hand. Two of the council members, Gallum and Reka, who donned green and red respectively, were once again arguing the decision on this new species. Should we not at least have voted to initiate diplomatic relations first, Reka? Gallum, I give you credit for your diplomacy with the Union, but please keep in mind how much blood was shed just to maintain our borders. We can't risk that. Do not let your sympathy cloud your judgment. Gallum resigned, leaving Reka with his head high, having won their argument. Callum motioned to speak, and the four councilmen quieted. Reka is right. It was not long since our border wars with the Union were fought. Reka raised his nose high. However, if not for Gallum, we would not have such a sturdy treaty to use against the Union, and as such, they are honor-bound to it. The four nodded in agreement. What say you, Reka? He motioned to a blue-robed individual, small in stature to the rest. Logistically, we don't know how these people would fare against our military. We're not the best in ground warfare, so our best bet would be ship warfare, he added. If they are new, it's possible this campaign will be swift. I do hope so, Callum said with a heavy heart. Polis, you look like you wish to say something. The purple-robed individual rose from his seat, towering over his fellows. Of course I do. With the fathers before us, we as the current have a duty to uphold. I do not regret this decision to brand these spacefarers as an enemy akin to the Union. He paused, regaining his composure. It is the right thing to do for our people. We need that territory, and the farther from Union space, the better. He garnered the collective nods from his brothers and sat down. Callum slumped into the back of his chair that rose above him, and his white drapes provided cushion on the already comfy chair he sat upon. Polis, state to the people, if we wish to make this campaign a decisive one, we will need the support of the masses. I do not care how you do it. Just do it, he said before rising from his seat. The four rose as he made his way out of the chamber, and he sighed heavily. Callum removed his ceremonial robes and sat at his desk. He had all the time to contemplate his decision, but shoved them aside reluctantly. O fathers, I ask that you watch over the war chief and his forces for a successful campaign and for our victory and mercy to wash us of our sin. He prayed to himself. Not long after he retired to his quarters, he received a notification on his desk monitor. It was a speech by Polis. My, he certainly works fast, Callum mumbled to himself and played the video. It was the central square in the heart of their capital, Artray. It wasn't far from the War Council's chambers, but it was also the most populated for all to see. He played it. Fellow Sellians, hear me now. He paused. For how long have we lived under the fear of the Galactic Union? For now, our borders with them stay quiet, but ever vigilance is required to stay their hand and protect our borders. He paused once more before continuing. Our honored war chief has come across a new and fearsome foe. They stay silent in the stars, stalking new and upcoming colonies. What can we do with such a foe? I say we attack. They have encroached on our latest colony and have killed fellow citizens of Celia. Boos and vulgarity sprouted from the crowd, and Polis continued. That is why we need every able-bodied individual to aid in this fight against this scourge. He began playing doctored videos previously played to them by Torlak. They have no unity, and they prey on each other. The video shocked the crowd, and anger was present in their eyes. Barbarians, savages, and all related terms were thrown at their new enemy. So join us. Join the fight against the scourge of the stars. Join Celia. The crowd bellowed in support. It was due to the speech that all branches saw a vast increase in recruitment across all of their space, not just the military, but industrial jobs as well. Callum accesses records of each source of production. While the military saw the highest, shipbuilders and military technology saw a rise in applicants. Such a case would generate a large boom for their economy. He was ecstatic at the rise of the industry for his people. He wouldn't let the War Council let his people down. He was now invested in his people and actively sought to keep this craze. It is what the fathers would want. As such, Callum would issue endorsements to a multitude of industries. Their approval would be through the roof, and if they maintain this, well, they might just go down in history. After several days, Callum received notice from Torlak about some cargo he recently acquired. What news do you bring, Chief General? Callum asked. We were successful in our raid on Demira and Anmira. I have sent cargo ships back to Artray. I suppose you find a way to utilize them, Torlak responded. What did you bring? I have captured slaves of the enemy. Oh, then I will get Galem and Brekka to broker some sort of trade agreement with the Union. This will bring us goodwill, and hopefully they will leave us alone, Callum said, running the newfound success of their once waning economy. I will procure more cargo ships to the front upon the subjugation of the worlds you come across. Torlak bowed, but not before he stated his final request. I fear the more we press on into their territories, their security will only increase. Do we have any word on the other war chiefs to send to the front? We do, Callum said plainly. I will issue a call to available chiefs. Currently, I can only offer Chief Commander Brallo. He will do, Torlak said with a hint of disdain. I will report after my next conquest. He gave a final bow and cut the transmission. Callum changed his call and Bralow's name was selected. After a moment, the person in question answered. "To whom do I owe the pleasure?" Bralow said in a scaly tone. His face was scarred and he wore damaged ceremonial armor. His lower jaw was replaced with one made of metal. "Ah, Chief War Councilman, this is unusual." "I assume you've already heard," Callum said sternly, placing a callous facade upon his face. "If you mean the speech by Councilman Polis, then yes." "Then you must know what I am asking of you." Bralow nodded. "I am redirecting your forces to the front alongside Chief General Torlak." Bralow laughed before reassuming his previous demeanor. "Little Torlak made Chief General? Well, I am surprised." "That won't be an issue, will it?" Callum asked. "It will not. So what do you wish of my forces?" Callum thought for a moment. Torlak will require extra hands in his campaign, and his fleet is not well versed in ground combat as yours are. "Very well, I shall see to it. Where will I be going?" "Just beyond the new colony system of Yamela. There is an interspace gate opposite the system. You are free to raid what is left of Demira and Anmira," Callum explained. "Very well," he hissed before cutting off the transmission. Callum rested upon his bed, and before he knew it, drifted off to sleep. The first days of the war had started. He and his people were now committed. Callum woke up from his nap to a plethora of messages, and from his quick assessment, most were good news. All were domestically related, and so he pushed them onto the other 4 council members. Several stated a need for a draft of terms for diplomatic trade, with Breka manning all relations of logistics, both militarily and commercial. All messages directed toward the military were sent to Reka. He had ways voiced that there needed to be a change in the training regimen to get their ground troops familiar. Finally, he moved the last of the messages that dealt with public relations to Polis. After sending those messages to the appropriate recipients, he donned his white robes and made his way to the central council chamber. The other 4 were present, but were busy dealing with issues he had just passed to them on their podium monitors. The drum of clerical workers ran about, each cog in the machine giving orders to their lesser. It was normal for him to see, so he paid it no mind. As it came closer to high sun, the workflow slowed and the chamber was found mostly empty, save for some guards scattered about the room. In the center, a well-dressed worker stood at the center, with a data pad in his hand, and he began to disclose the next order of business. "For the following hearing, we have the promotion of 2 war chiefs. The first is War Chief Dalagon. He has been in service during the end portion of the border dispute with the Union and has since curbed any unauthorized Union ships from operating within Celian space." The council members were pleased with his assessment and motioned for a second. "The second is War Chief Namu. He oversees our armored division and was responsible for the subjugation of multiple Halen deathworms at Mining Facility 113, effectively securing materials needed for ship manufacture and IS gate engine cores. His efforts greatly contribute to the current threat we are facing." A round of applause went around the council. "All in favor of their promotion," Reka announced, and was met with unanimous assent. "Bring them in." He gave a slight bow and motioned for the doors opposite of them to open, and the 2 in question made their way to the center and knelt. "Raise your heads, warriors," Callum spoke in a tone that demanded silence. "You both have done great work for the Celian people, and it will be my honor to grant both of you the title of chief captains." Another round of applause came from the councilmen. Both were given a band of cloth that was wrapped around their collar. It was black with a single golden icon of an avian predator native to Celia called a Revan. All chief captains begin with the Revan. This occasion was showcased on video into many military installations, especially those these chiefs have served with. Callum spoke. "Now, with your new titles, you will be allocated 250 ships each." Namu and Dalagon were in shock. "I know it seems like a lot, it is, but I have confidence you will both deliver to Celia and her people." They affirmed in unison. "Before you go, once you are acquainted with your fleets, you are to assist Chief General Torlak in his efforts of our most sacred crusade." They both nodded fervently, and when dismissed, promptly left the chamber. When they were clear, the councilmen took their seats. Only 250? Reka questioned. I was sure we planned to give them each a fleet of at least 500 ships. Now, brother, Brekka calmed, the issue on Halen dampened production, and those death worms were wreaking havoc on the entire world. It can't be helped. 250 each. Reka resigned to the facts. Besides, an additional 500 ships would do well to bolster the campaign fleet. Again, Reka sighed and quietly returned to his podium monitor. Brekka, how many ships does that bring the main force to? Callum asked. Well, Torlak boasts most of the fleet at 1,000 ships total, and with Chief Commander Bralo and now Namu and Dalagon, with a total of 650. So 1,650 total ships, Brekka answered. That's almost as much during the Union border war. It's practically the embodiment of death, Galen retorted. Isn't that the point? Interjected Polis, who received agreement from his brethren. There's no reason we should lessen our forces now. We need to maintain some by the border to keep up appearances, so the Union doesn't get any funny ideas. Callum and the other councilmen agreed. They couldn't back down now, but they also couldn't sacrifice forces from the border. Chief General Torlak would have to make do with his current and incoming forces. The War Council adjourned for the day, keen to the workings of increasing military and the threat of Union intervention. Callum thought to himself about the implications of hiding such an entity. Luckily, the time it would take them to reach Celian space would only take about a year from their closest colony in the outer reaches of the Union. As such, he jammed all signals outbound in their direction. With the day now over, Callum and his council retired for the day. Data log of Celian First Contact, 2667. Starrunner 4311, Pilot J. Kurt. Jay looked out into a brightly colored tunnel that swirled purples, blues, and white as they zipped by toward their destination. With a half-eaten burrito in hand and his legs propped up on his dash, he called for his one other crew member. Hey, how much longer to Demicom? An audible sigh could be heard from a station behind his pilot's seat. If you just look at your displays, you would know. I know, he paused, taking another bite of his station burrito. But I'm eating, Jay said with a smirk. Just under an hour, Cam said, returning to his station. He manipulated a series of functions on his display, and the audible sounds of redirecting power could be heard. What you doing? Jay asked. Just rerouting power to generate the shields before we exit our jump. I swore we were maxed, said Jay. What's our signature output at? I would not be surprised if there were pirates this far out. Cam scanned his monitor and gave a short reply. IR is dancing around 1 to 1.5 thousand. EM is around 2.6 thousand. I'll lower power output once we exit our jump. Good to know, Cam. I could always count on you, Jay said before returning to his remaining burrito. Several minutes passed and the crew was reaching the end of their jump. Like a fish out of water, the crew was met with the silent void and only the drum of their engine to keep them company. Shields are full, lowering power output to a minimum. Hey, Cam said with a hint of worry in his voice. Are you reading this? He said, directing Jay to a monitor on his dash. No, it's just showing up for me. Jay maneuvered his fingers and brought the signal online. Check the status of Dema 4 and 5. I'm not picking up their waypoints on my HUD. As he said, the signal came through as an urgent plea for help. If anyone can hear this, please, send the fleet, the guard, I don't care who, just come. It played before the signal was cut off and began to loop. What the hell? Jay muttered before his attention was brought back by Cam. Got a signal from a lone commercial satellite. Long-range capabilities are shot, so it's only transmitting in the system. Delta band. Delta band? He thought. Cam, check the other commercial bands. He shook his head. Just noise. Then a sudden realization came upon Com and suddenly began furiously tapping away at his station. After a few moments and calls from Jay that went ignored, Com spoke. It ain't pirates, and motioned for his findings onto a free monitor in front of Jay. It was a series of still images from the lone satellite. Several large ships were followed by a series of smaller ones. Jay noted 3 large ships he thought to be a carrier of sorts, due to the amount of much smaller ones, the size of a typical fighter, who were entering and leaving. Surrounding them looked to be a series of cruisers, frigates, and corvettes, with the smaller version boasting a large presence. "It's an entire invasion force. But from what?" Cam said, scanning the material once more and adding notes. "Switching to optical lenses, increase power output," Jay ordered. "I doubt that's a good idea," Cam rebuked. Jay sighed. "Just do it, Cam." With a motion of his finger, he slid the indicator for power output beyond the minimum, and with that came brighter lights, electronics, and their signature. "Just a moment," Jay said in a focused trance. "And got it. Sending you the data now." It was another series of videos and images from the satellite that detailed images on the surface, as well as high-definition shots of the invading forces. "Jesus, they're taking slaves," Cam blurted. "We have to notify the fleet." "The ship can't send that amount of data. It'll only get corrupted, and the station here is nothing but dust." Jay paused. "We're going to have to head back to the Draxis system and at least issue a read-only transmission." "Fine, I'll prep a statement," Cam said right before alarms began blaring in the compartment. "What the hell? We got contacts. 3, Jay reported urgently. Shots of red plasma flew by his ship, and the shields flickered from the impact before settling. Jay swung the ship in an erratic U-turn and ordered max output and max thrust. "What about shields?" Cam hollered. "We're fine. Focus shields to the rear until we jump." The alarm still blared, and a red light flashed intermittently in the singular cabin, while Jay did his best to outmaneuver his enemy's shots. He cycled the targeting system through each enemy, but did so intending to gather as much information as possible. His ship was defenseless. No missiles, no guns, only thrust. Nearing the edge of the system, the ship rocked and comm reported that their shield was depleted and long-range communications were shot. "I was able to send a message to Stellar Command, but I don't know if it'll reach them in time. Not without a slip-space laser array." "How long before it reaches then?" Jay probed. 7 days, despair engulfed the cabin. The rattling of the ship and red light were the only constant in their escape. "Well, good news. We got distance. Preparing to jump into slip space." Cam refastened his harness and began transferring all data onto a single drive, out of the many they already possessed. "Just so you know, I scrubbed all the data from the ship and put it on a drive." "Good. Get ready. I'm making the jump." Cam nodded even though Jay couldn't see him, and executed the slip space sequence. A dark purple, blue, and white circle appeared in front of them, almost seemingly out of nowhere. It was just large enough for the ship to enter. Jay looked at his radar and every other sensor he had and found the interceptors too far to engage with normal fire, but an alarm indicating a lock blared. "You have got to be kidding me," Jay yelled. A symbol of fire appeared on his screen with a countdown that descended rapidly. He waited until the countdown reached 3 before he launched countermeasures. A series of rapid pops were felt from the ship, and when the countdown hit 0, an explosion rocked the starboard side of the ship. Seeing that they weren't dead and the flares worked, he accelerated into the sphere. As soon as they passed, their opening closed behind them. They had survived. "Ha!" A large, frustrated sigh erupted from Jay. "What the hell, man?" Another sigh was heard from Cam, just not as loud. "Did you analyze their ships?" Jay asked. "Not yet. They're heavy on the fighter front, and I don't even want to know what kind of weapons those ships have." He slid into his chair. Silence regained hold of the cabin once more, and the light of slip space filtered through the cockpit. "How long until Draxis?" Silently tapping on the monitor, Cam responded, "About 8 hours." "All right, I'll take my nap first. Wake me up in 4. Jay pressed a button and his seat moved back on a rail before swiveling 180 degrees from the cockpit. Cam's station faced the bulkhead to his right, and their bunks were just the opposite of that. The rack that held their data drives was placed next to his station. The restroom was situated opposite next to the bunks and was sealed. Beyond that were solely maintenance doors that had access to easily replaceable components. Jay took some time to siphon through them before setting on one designated for communications. We don't happen to have an extra-size one comms package, do we? Jay asked. Nope, just rations. Jay sighed and yanked the smoky component from its slot and set it down. He figured that damage from the plasma shot fried the circuits as they sent out their final message to Saul. In any case, long-range communication was out of the question until they could get a replacement part. Jay retired for now to his bottom bunk and dozed off. The hum of the ship and the tapping away of fingers on keys. Data log of Celian First Contact, 2667. Star Runner 4311, pilot Jay Kurt and Cam Ferron. Jay settled into his seat as it swiveled him to face the cockpit and secured itself. He brought up a holographic display and selected some buttons on a related display, and the image changed to that of their destination. Draxus System. It's a single-star system with 4 planets. The closest to the sun, Veru, is inhospitable, but had a large following of miners that scoured its numerous cave systems. Then Gala, a gas giant with 3 moons that each house separate research facilities. Draxus, the main colony with its small moon, and finally Drona. Another planet similar to Veru is used primarily as a mining colony. He scanned the holo display and set a course for Mantis Station. It was the largest station that orbited Draxus and was the center of trade in the system. That was his destination and his only source to get word to the Republic about an impending attack. His travel time was just a little over an hour, but his anxiety ate at him. It was a wonder he was able to sleep at all. He did pre-operational checks on all his systems and occasionally rerouted power to regenerate his lost shields. When everything was fine for the moment, he just stared off into space. Just a few minutes before they exited the jump, Jay woke calm. They entered their seats and prepared to exit. With a flash, they were met with the same familiar void, but this time both sighed in relief. "Oh, thank God," Cam voiced. "Normal comms traffic." That brought reassurance to Jay as he maneuvered himself for a slipstream jump. Slipstream was different from normal slipspace in it, that slipspace was used for inter-system travel, while stream was only ever utilized for intra-system travel. With ships as small as his, that's all it could allow. Newer models of ships allowed slipspace jumps in the system, but that needed heavier computational power. So such a function was only available to ships larger than medium-class frigates. He didn't mind it. From where he entered from, a stream jump would only take about 10 minutes. As such, he oriented his ship to align with Mantis Station's nav beacon. When his engine was spooled, he jumped, the sounds of comm, organizing a meeting with on-site security, faintly filtering through his helmet. Upon approach to the station, Jay finally made contact with the station, although it was only automated. "Please proceed to your designated landing pad." The voice said in a feminine sway, and the beacon popped up on his HUD for his landing zone. The landing pad was an exposed deck with a nearby airlock and blinking lights to indicate the area where he could land. When he made his way above it, he issued an auto-land command with a press of a button. The ship oriented itself and landed without issue. Jay readied his helmet and motioned for Cam to do the same, to which Cam nodded. "I'm going to stay with the ship," he said. "I just got a feeling." Cam handed the drive in question to Jay. "I've organized with the station's security to meet with us. I couldn't risk a panic with what they know." Jay nodded and opened the hatch. He had in place a second-generation air shield, so there wasn't a need for Cam to don his helmet. However, just to be cautious, he was quick in his egress and promptly sealed the door. He tapped his wrist-mounted device and spoke, "Keep the ship warm and call for a refuel and repair order. I'll see if I can see the liaison." "Got it," Cam replied, and Jay made his way into the airlock. When the airlock cycled and opened into the main foray, he was met with a bustling station. He entered the station and made his way to security. On his way, he was met by several vendors that had tried to sell him goods that he didn't need, impeding his traffic. Clumsily, he was able to break through as he continued on his way to the station security offices. As he made his way through the large station's main pathway, he would hear inklings of conversation. "Have you been able to contact your cousin on Dema yet?" "No, they might be doing repairs on a relay. You would think they'd issue some kind of maintenance notice." Jay's heart sank. He could very well reveal to them the state of the Deme colony, but what would that accomplish? It would either incite panic, or they would just label him a madman. He couldn't do that to them, but he also couldn't let whatever happened to Dema happen to Draxus. This system has a larger population than Dema did since it was new, so it's possible that they might have a chance. Or so he wished. He hastened his pace to beyond a jog, causing many to look at him with curiosity, not knowing the danger they were in, rushing to the security offices opposite of his airlock and entered the door. 2 guards flanked his sides, eyeing him for his sudden and haggard appearance. Jay approached the well-dressed female clerk, her expression one of boredom. "How may I be of assistance?" The female clerk beckoned, her tone matching her expression. "I need to speak with a Republic Stellar Command liaison. Now, please," he said. "We called earlier. It's urgent." She began tapping away on her computer before she spoke again. "First, I need a name and reason for your appointment." "Jay Kurt," he said as she typed away, "and the reason is confidential. Liaison's eyes only." He responded sternly, trying to impose urgency. She looked at him and stated, "Sir, if it is urgent, then I need to know. I'm sure the Draxus militia can handle a few pirate—" "It's not pirates, okay?" The moment he raised his voice, the guards that stood by the doors slowly made their way toward him. "Look, sir, I can't help if you do not tell me exactly what you need," she calmly ordered. Jay collected his composure and stated, "All right, fine." He readied the drive from a pouch that it sat in and continued, "Dema colony was attacked. Not by pirates, not by rogues, I don't know, but they weren't human. It couldn't be." She raised an eyebrow at his request. "Very well, let me call for him." She tried to call using a handheld device. "Huh, that's odd. The call's not going through," she commented, turning her body toward the rear offices. "Let me fetch him. He should be on his break." Before departing, Jay called out to her, "By the way, where's the nearest fleet?" She paused a moment. "Alameda." She left, and the guards that began their encroach retreated to their posts by the door. As each second went by, his anxiety rose quickly. It was then that his fear became reality. The station rocked violently, and the luminescent lights turned from white to red, and the alarms began ringing out. "Alert, alert, damage to station relay. Enemy combatants inbound. Alert, alert." Another explosion rocked the station, and Jay ran out from the security office, data drive in tow. Panic was set, and the residents of the station ran in all directions. Some tripped over themselves and over others to try to get to safety. Jay tried to hail comm, but the call didn't go through. As he ran, he looked out the station's innumerable planes of multi-layered glass and saw what unfolded outside. He noticed a small cluster of ships between him and the moon. It was large enough to view the silhouettes from the station. Immediately by the station, however, a battle raged on with station forces and militia against an unknown aggressor. From the get-go, the battle was disorganized, while the enemy maintained a sharp state of orderliness. Station sentry guns assisted in the fray and promptly weakened the few that got close. Those unlucky ships were bathed in flames and rested as metal coffins for the occupants. He was glad to see the bastards get vaporized, but his joy was short-lived. As the enemy withdrew, several bursts of plasma peppered another section of the station. He ran. He fastened his helmet and continued running. Shots periodically missed their mark, but the ones that did deliver a jaw-shattering shock to the station. Each moment, he tried contacting Cam, and each attempt failed. Running, he peered out the window and noticed his ship still in one piece, and a frantic Cam in the pilot seat. They saw each other, and he ran even faster, not knowing when the next volley would land. He entered the airlock and waited. The cycling felt like ages, but when it finally signaled that it was clear, he made a clumsy dash to his ship. He was grounded as long as at least one foot was on the deck. As he got closer, Cam exited the pilot seat and opened the door wearing his helmet. "Were you able to talk to the fleet?" he asked frantically as Jay made his way into his seat, and Cam followed suit. "No, they took their sweet-ass time before I could speak with them and give the drive. Then these assholes arrived and blasted half the station to dust," he yelled as he fastened his harness and placed his hands on his ship's throttle and stick. Where are we headed now? Cam said, urgently putting on his harness at his station. Alameda, he said, lifting off the platform and providing max thrust as soon as he was clear of the station. The sun was in his way, so he would have to maneuver to Veru and then correct to a proper just location. As soon as he was clear and past the influence of the sun, he could make his slip space jump. As he flew past, he cycled through the comms channels. He was met with static when a thought struck him from their first encounter. His anxiety rose the longer they were out of contact. Cam, switch all bands to Delta and notify all friendly ships. On it, and he furiously sent his hands into a frenzy. After a moment, the sounds of battle came alive. What the hell? It works! One pilot shouted and was followed by several more individuals. Get the word out, Delta band only, encrypt it, another ordered, knowing well what frequency was used. Through the change in communication, their forces organized and they were at a standstill with the enemy. All right, who was it? The same pilot from earlier questioned. Me, Sir, Star Runner 4311. J. Kurt, he replied. You've done some good work. So what do you know about the enemy? Jay briefly summarized the events in the demo system and their newfound mission. I understand, he said solemnly. Then you boys have no time to lose. Leave this to us. Yes, sir, Jay replied. If they fight like how you say, then there's no point in running, not for us, he said with a calmness. Normally, I would have signals from this system's relays, but they've all gone dark. Jay and Cam both understood that implication. You two go now. Send word to Vice Admiral Wolf in Alameda. Tell him, Captain Roy sent you. He gave a final farewell. As they departed, the howls of combat from pilots rang out through the intercoms. Fates were sealed in a sudden cut of static during mid-sentence or cry. An encrypted message was sent in all directions that notified their ship, but it wasn't directed to them. It was a last-ditch cry for reinforcements, system-wide for all who could hear it, but was instead met with silence. Nevertheless, Jay set his course for Veru and activated Slipstream. As he and Cam left, so did the cries and howls of his brethren, leaving nothing dust and echoes in their wake. As Jay approached Veru, silence remained constant. All bands were silent, including Delta. No relays, satellites, or stations reached out to their pleas. His hope of sending another message to nigh hopelessly. Cam, he said softly, do you think we'll make it? Silence engulfed him, but he spoke out, his words now choking him. We have to. We're the only ones who can. Without looking back, Jay nodded, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. He set the course for the outer edge of the system. From his hollow display, he had a few more systems to go before reaching Alameda. Jay spooled the slip space drive core, and once it was set, he entered the ever-entrancing portal to their next destination. Data log of Cillian contact, 2067. War Chief General Torlak. Torlak mumbled. The battle unfolded on a screen at the front of the bridge. Something the matter, Chief General? A bridge crewman asked. I find our campaign too easy. I expected more resistance. The video we had of their navy exhumed might. Not whatever this is, he said with a raised tone. The fighters at the front line re-engaged the ragtag team of enemy fighters and met a force of least resistance. Those sentries are doing work on our fighters. Order the fighters to disengage and have the corvettes prepare a final volley against the station, ordered Torlak. Yes, General, complied a lowly helmsman. The corvettes positioned themselves to not fire on one another and sent one final volley of cannons. The shells themselves were small and so was the yield, but focus fire proved effective, even more so against a vulnerable orbital station. The station exploded spectacularly, throwing debris in all directions. Some even smashed directly into his ships. Make sure all fighters are clear. We can't lose them to pieces of the station. He analyzed the battlefield and noticed a standstill with a collection of enemy forces. What of these forces here? He motioned to an analyst that was scanning the opposite side of the holo display. It says here, there's only around 50 enemy ships here and are holding back our forces. I understand your concern. he started. We did some focused scans, and most of them are boasting what looks to be new models of ships that previously perished. They're not going down as easy. Torlak looked in dismay. What of the ship with the larger signature? Looks to me that it's keeping most of the ships at bay. He pointed to the larger icon, and a visual was brought up upon request. It was a large ship relative to the others surrounding it. It was long that came to a tapered point. The dorsal portion of the ship had a series of guns on the left and right, with a dual set of single-barrel cannons that lined a spine. Some of the enemy fighters baited some of his own, and when they came into range were promptly decimated with well-placed shots. Torlak's body alarms rang and ordered several corvettes and his fighters to swarm the group. The closer they approached, his fighters would be picked off, and some larger fighters would be swarmed and summarily executed. He felt some pride in their drive to survive and ordered their execution. 4 corvettes made their way to the enemy's location and awaited their report. He returned to the holo display, and on it showed his forces evenly split. He initially arrived with 4 carriers, 5 cruisers, and 15 frigates with a mix of small, medium, and light. In addition, he sported around 20 corvettes. The rest were fighters that each found a home with their ships. Most were stationed on the carriers and cruisers, and some were placed on frigates, and the rest escorted the frigates. As soon as they entered the system, he made it essential that they jammed all signals for inter-system communication. Gotta hand it to the Science Depot for the jammer. It's working wonders, Torlak commented, to which Creo agreed. We figured it would do well against the Union, but it needed some field tests. We were about to use it in the Halen system, but then the War Council commenced this invasion, he said without lifting his head from a datapad. My statement still stands, he replied before he received a report from the field strategist. Chief General, he said, we finally have reports from the other assault groups. The ships from the mining planets suffered minor losses, and the group that made its way to the gas giant is meeting resistance. What do they report? He commanded. Surface defenses, we've already lost multiple corvettes and frigates, the field strategist reported. He expected total annihilation for the enemy, but this colony was fighting fiercely. We weren't given an exact number, but the fact that they reported losses instead of conquest was cause for concern. Sir, the enemy is moving, a shout came from the previous field strategist. They're headed planet side. Perhaps they plan to evacuate the non-combatants. He studied the view before him. Issue orders to Chief Commander Brallo and have him and his soldiers descend onto the planet. Take in a company of corvettes and frigates to assist. Chief, with only his fleet of 150, he responded, should we not just bombard the surface? And risk what knowledge they have? No, he ordered, prepare support for a ground invasion of Brallo's forces. Yes, Chief, said the strategist as he began issuing orders to the multitude of ships as his fleet began towards the planet. Reports born of chaos flooded his bridge. Many ships made it to the surface following after the insignificant fleet that fought them earlier, but a new case of chaos flooded the ship. Chief General, a visual came online that took a spot on the forward-facing viewport. It was Brallo. What's wrong? We're getting reports of mass casualties, Torlak commanded a response. Did you not properly survey the planet? He snarled. We did proper scans of your landing zones. There was no evidence of there being defenses. He pointed to a scanner. Yes, sir. The planet showed no signs of armed defenses. We thought it safe for landing. He cowered behind the Chief General. You thought wrong, Brallo retorted. What happened? Beckoned Torlak. The planet is swarming with an increased force of fighters not seen planet-side. Not to mention that nearly all of my accompanied fighters were assaulted and now lay with the dirt or in the waters. Torlak thought for a moment. This is fine. He garnered surprise from both the scanner and Brallo. They have no way to call for reinforcements, he began. But sir, the data, started the scanner, but was promptly hushed by Torlak. Torlak continued. They have no reinforcements, so we have that covered. Just focus on striking at their military installations and city centers. We have slaver ships inbound to this system. Yes, General, he replied, and the call was cut. The scanner resurfaced his earlier comment. But sir, what about that data ship? Surely they've made their way to the edge of the system for a jump. Don't worry, I've sent a ship ahead to intercept them in the next system. With what orders? He asked. To capture. The reports of losses slowed, and with a view on his holo display, showed that both forces were at a standstill. While he could very well just bombard the planet from orbit, he decided against it. He found that information on the enemy would greatly give an insight into their greater community. While awaiting on the bridge, Torlak received a call from one of the forces below. It was Dalagon. Chief General, he said, my fleet is ready for a second assault on the planet. We await your orders. When the combat stalled, he ordered all available forces to pull back and maintain vigilance around their impromptu field base. The ground team suffered severe losses, and without guaranteed air support, they couldn't support their request for targeted strikes. The enemy was recovering, and Torlak didn't like where that would lead. Hold fast, young captain, he ordered. Regroup with the nearest group and await my orders. Dalagon nodded and cut off the call. Torlak knew he was eager to prove himself, but he couldn't allow that. Not when they knew so little about the enemy. Have you calculated the populace of the planet? Torlak inquired. The scanner manipulated his station a moment before answering. From some of the data recovered by ground teams, approximately 10 million. It seems like a relatively lightly populated colony. Most seem to have been taken to bunkers. Can you find them? Torlak probed, to which the scanner shook his head in the negative. There's strong interference from the city centers, so it is difficult to tell. We will focus on that at another time, he said before returning to the holo display that revealed the planets and his collective forces. Torlak studied the information and scanned the field once more, when was notified of a likely target by his strategist. How about here, General? He showed an isolated compound away from the city's defenses. From what we've learned from the rest of the planet's defenses, this compound is lightly defended, and scans indicate it is lightly populated. Forward scouts believe it to be an intelligence base. Torlak was pleased. Then we'll strike there. Good work. The scanner bowed and returned to his station. He then turned to the strategist and issued his new commands. Contact Dalagon and the rest of the fleet planet side to attack these targets. He pointed at several large city centers that boasted many of the defenses that took down the first wave. This time, keep them out of effective range and just maintain on drawing their fire, he ordered. Contact Brallo and notify him of our target. Yes, General, responded the strategist. Data log of salient contact, 2067. Captain Roy. Roy and his band of fellow militiamen stood at a standstill. The fighters that previously assaulted the station held the advantage, but when he and his men switched frequencies, they were able to mount organized resistance. He, like many others, was unaware of Delta Band. It wasn't a common band in the current age, but with some digging, noticed all ships carried a form of it. It operated in a very short range and found itself arbitrarily switching from the extremely low frequencies encrypted through radiation from stars. As a result of this, the connections through it can be made, but its effect grows the closer in proximity one is to another capable of transmitting the band itself. Surprisingly, are many ships built from 2400 and later. Gotta hand it to those kids finding this out, Roy muttered to himself. The cannons from the large ship beside him rang out through the speakers of his ship with dramatic feedback. Another enemy fighter went down. When one perished, another took its place, and the eerie silhouettes of ships larger than their own plagued him. He noticed that fighters began backing off, and indicators showed that the enemy was advancing. With their jammers, he was stuck with limited radar as the feedback proved to be inconsistent and the Delta Band for ship-to-ship communication. So he took his chance. All ships, this is Captain Roy, head of Draxus Militia. Descend planet side to regroup and rearm, sending coordinates now. He ordered and led the way. Roy connected to a comms officer on the ground at his rendezvous. It was a worn-down military installation when the colony was first founded some 10-odd years ago and was largely abandoned by the Republic. However, that didn't stop the militia from taking control and making it their planet-side HQ. He was initially locked on by base defenses, but they ceased when he came closer to the base. When he landed and departed his ship, he was met by a well-dressed man accompanied by several guards. "Captain Roy?" he exclaimed. What the hell is going on? We lost contact with Mantis Station and our communications on the ground are a mess." Roy held his hands up in a motion to try and calm the man before him. "Just calm down first," he started. "We were attacked, and not by some pirates or mercs. Something else entirely," he said, confusion visible on his peer's face. "That's why I need you to send out a notice over Delta Band. The enemy is bound to enter that atmosphere any moment, we don't have time to lose," he commanded. When the young officer did budge, Roy commanded with a visceral scream, "Move it, Lieutenant! This is a fucking order!" The officer scrambled away with a guard in tow, and Roy ordered the rest of the guards to remain. "Right now, we don't have much time, but an enemy is looking to assault the planet, and it's our job to stop them, at whatever the cost," he ordered. "You probably don't have handheld equipment that can transmit in Delta, so get some techs to rig the antenna to do that. We can tune our radios to hijack the signal. Get to it." The men did as he ordered and commanded or notified their commanders of the changes. Within several minutes, Roy received reports of the successful implementation of the new frequency. City centers were notified of an attack, and all non-combat capable individuals were taken to bunkers. This time, Roy stood around a table that projected a holographic display of not just the surrounding area, but also the planet. "How are surface-to-space scans coming?" he inquired. "The band doesn't fare well in the atmosphere, and the best we can get is the top of the stratosphere. That's as early as we're going to get," one officer spoke. "What about planetary defenses? What do we have available?" "Planet-wide defenses are slowly coming online. Once they're up, they should be able to retaliate without a wireless connection," another reported. "We've already got reports of enemy contact, and defenses are reporting mass enemy casualties. They didn't know what hit them." "Good," he started. "We just have to be able to hold out until the fleet arrives." The officers surrounding the table looked at one another, and skepticism filled their faces. "I mean, no disrespect, but," one officer started, "do you count on that Star Runner to make it?" He sighed. "They have to. We've got no other choice." The others reluctantly agreed. "For now, the best we can do is defend and keep an eye out for landing parties. I don't want any more surprises." "Yes, sir," they collectively answered. The first wave left as fast as it came. It was just over a couple hours since their initial descent onto the planet, and made arrangements to unify their communication within the enemy's jammer. Reports came in of landing parties out from the city center's influence, and periodic strafing runs were conducted to try and destroy what emplacements they had. Some managed their mark. Reports also came in from militiamen on the ground encountering the enemy in gunfights. Roy commanded ships with surveillance tech to support the ground troops and relayed shoddy videos of their engagements. One such engagement took place in a dilapidated housing sector that was more flat land than actual homes. His men took up locations in buildings that have yet to crumble, and flashes of tracers filled the battlefield. The enemy returned in kind with red flashes that filled the air. "Get me a report from the ground. What kind of tech are they carrying?" he ordered, and an officer manning a series of monitors beckoned for the battlefield. "Got a direct line from one of the troops. Patching him through now." The call came through, and sounds of gunfire filled the audio, and the screen came online with choppy video. The operator managing the call did what he could smooth over the video. "Sergeant Cooper, reporting," the trooper said, ducking from incoming fire, and pieces of a wall flew from the impacts. The trooper was fitted with a camouflage pattern that looked to be dated in the 23rd century. He wore a modern up-armored chest rig, and his sleeves were rolled just up his forearm, and wore a single-hold balaclava and a worn ballistic helmet with an up-armored attachment on the frontal portion of the helmet. "Sergeant, I need to know what kind of weaponry the enemy employs." The sergeant looked over the barricade and gave some orders to some of the troopers under him. Calls for the cover fire were heard, and a litany of cracks from the friendly suppressive fire filled the scene, before the sergeant turned his attention to the camera. Hostiles employ a mix of ballistic and energy, shoots like a repeating laser. Few of their ground forces use it, so I think it's new, even for them. Good work. See if you can recover their tech of personnel. If you can't, don't leave one standing. Yes, sir, the sergeant responded before the call cut out. For now, defenses were holding, and small engagements occurred on the outskirts of the city centers. How are we looking for our spy satellites? I don't think they've hit them all, inquired Roy. We've been trying to get a stable connection using the Delta band, but the signal can't get past the stratosphere. We'd need something to boost the signal, then we might be able to link whatever satellites we have, answered a comms officer. Do it, he ordered. Send the most stealth-capable ship we have to act as a booster. The young officers surrounding him got to work, and he turned his attention back to the holotable. The battlefield casualties danced between forces, with humanity losing ground, while keeping in range of anti-air battery defenses. A call rang from the previous officer as he reported news on the booster. Great work, he said calmly as the holotable updated in real time. You've got to be kidding me, he mumbled. The display of the planet was in view, and as more satellites came online, more red indicators filled the space around the planet. Classifications were given to each indicator based on sizes and were constantly updated with scans from select satellites. A wealth of corvettes, a multitude of frigates differing in size, a handful of cruisers, and 4 carriers. The rest of the scene was filled with fighters in formation in support of their ground troops. They were at the enemy's mercy, and Roy struggled to find a way around it. However, that changed when he was alerted to a notification from the comms officer. Sir, I have a message. It is automated, but it seems to be coming from Shield Base Gamma. Roy played it and analyzed the holotable. He noticed a strange contingent breaking off from the main force and gathering in what was almost a seemingly deserted area. What kind of information does Gamma hold? He said urgently. The OWL program, military intelligence, tech, and location of Terra. The realization dawned on him. Get a strike team together. We can't let that base fall. I need a team yesterday. Aye, sir. The room responded in unison, and Captain Roy left the command center toward his ship.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.